Hey everybody, so we're going to be reading chapter 2 of this lovely book over here. I would recap, but nothing's happened. Ready? Half an hour later, I'd rediscovered my femininity. It's fun occasionally, sort of like an archaeological dig without the sweating. Laura Croft was pretty feminine and kick-ass. So was Alice from Resident Evil. Sort of. I stood before the bathroom mirror, resembling the pale regal daughter my mother would have preferred, wondering how I was supposed to hide my modified Walther PPK, which I called grief, underneath material that clung like an obsessive ex-boyfriend. I'm guessing that's a gun. I don't know what it looks like. I should probably Google it, but I'll do that later. I'd gone for an Asian look, because all of Asia has the same look, and discovered the red mandarin collar and short half-moon sleeves suited me fine, especially with my hair pinned up and swirled around the way I'd seen it done in Cosmo. Fake diamonds dangled from my ears, and though no one could see, they matched my belly button ring perfectly. The hilarious bit was that Pete had been the one to give it to me. His face had slowly flooded with color as he handed me the case. I understand that this is an appropriate item for your, that since you've got that piercing. What's it do? I'd asked as I'd taken the case and pulled out a fought diamond stud. It's a homing device, he said, obviously relieved that I hadn't made him stutter through the whole setup. You activate it by breaking the gem off the post. If you don't have a way to keep it on you once it's signaling, it has been tested safe on the digestive system so you can swallow it. Oh, goody. What happens after it's triggered? I asked. We have a team standing by in Miami. Once they've received the signal, their orders are to try and contact you, and, failing that, to coordinate a massive search and rescue. Isn't a homing device a tracking device? And why wouldn't you want that to be like a tracking device? Why is it just giving off a signal? So with my jewelry firmly in place, I gave myself one last critical look. I'd been careful with the makeup, so my eyes looked larger, greener, more soulful than usual. I had fine, fragile features that fooled almost everyone I met, a real advantage in my line of work. And the fact that my body leaned harder toward bony than athletic didn't hurt either. My legs were by far my best feature. They occasionally peeked through the side slits of my calf-length red satin skirt. I wore red low-heel sandals, and I could actually run. I wore red low-heel sandals I could actually run in, and I'd chosen a sequined handbag to match, so that's where I finally stowed my weapon. How fucking big are these guns? When I came out, Vale's bedroom doors, wow, he has more than one door, were still shut. I rapped on one. Yes? I'm going scouting back in 30. All right. I took off to find the address on a cleverly faked invitation. Diamond Suites was situated about 15 minutes from Hassan's place. The Lexus purred under me like a snoozing lioness as I drove there, but I resisted the urge to wake her up on the interstate. Pete's blood pressure tended to spike when he thought I'd done any excessive spending, and I figured he'd stroke out if I showed up with a speeding ticket on the way to a location. Emphasis on to in the book is italicized. I took a leisurely tour of Hassan's digs, trying not to gape too much at the enormous, brilliantly lit mansions fronted by country club-style landscaping. That is such a shitty descriptor. The lawns were all so well manicured you could have used them for putting greens. What a hoot if Dave and his buddies had lived here, because they actually would have. Who the fuck is Dave? Were we introduced to a Dave in the last chapter? Were we? I could imagine them all, full of that 18-year-old cockiness. You wish guys would never lose. Have you met 18-year-old guys? Drinking our dad's beer and calling their shots like it was a game of 8-ball. I spared my twin one more minute, wondering what part of the world held him up tonight, hoping he was okay. Why not just tell us from the get-go that's your twin? Like me, Dave's pretty high up on the hush-hush ladder. Like me, he started in a different part of the agency, but now he's a special ops stud, so he spends the majority of his time overseas. It's an excellent excuse for not keeping in touch, and we use it like a dust rag. If we were careful, we'd never have to speak to each other again. A hell of an accomplishment for people who used to complete each other's sentences. Enough, I told myself. Enough, enough, enough. I bit my lip, stopping the loop with pain. You're working, Jasmine, so work. Focus on the work. The work will keep you sane, at least in everybody else's eyes. Repetition there, everybody. I took a deep breath and let it out with a laugh when I saw the fancy scrolled metal sign on the gate in front of Hassan's house. Anything with an entrance right out of Jurassic Park and enough fencing to contain a herd of Bronchiosaurus demands a name, and Hassan had chosen Alpine Meadows. I remember the entrance to Jurassic Park. No way in hell will places like this have an entrance like Jurassic Park, without a mountain in sight. That is literally the entire sentence, without a mountain in sight. Nor were there any cute Austrian kids running around singing Do Re Mi. Who was this guy really kidding? The name might trigger thoughts of the sound of music, but it looked like the haunting of Hill House. Driving on, I discovered the area contained more dead ends and cul-de-sacs than a game of Clue, but I did find a couple of quick routes just in case. A game of Clue, I don't think has ever had any dead ends or cul-de-sacs. At least not my version of it, so I don't really know what version she's playing. I cruised the neighborhood 5 more minutes, soaking in the ambiance, picturing myself looking like I belonged inside of one of these 6-bedroom, 4.5-bath monstrosities. Then I went back for Vale. I didn't see him when I pulled into the parking lot, but I could feel him waiting for me. Wow, I really want these guys to have sex. Although it was more than that. It's an extra sense. One I've only had since ellipses. Well, for about 14 months. And I'm not the only one who's fascinated by it. During our first mission together, Vale had betrayed his interest in the fact that I can smell vamps. Not literally. Still, it's almost a visceral sense, something near the back of the nose and just behind the eyeballs that whispers immortal to the base of my brain. So behind the bridge of your nose? Different vamps make me react different ways, but that's the basic idea. We've been stalking a renegade named Gerardo, who the Italian authorities had asked us to bag before he decimated yet another university residence hall. Apparently he'd run through so many in Europe he'd felt the need to emigrate. Having trailed our quarry to the hushed quarters of Vassar Noy's house, we'd hoped the undergrads had enough brains to keep themselves barricaded in their rooms, and that my inner alarm would sound before one of them needed to escape for a quick pee. "Do you feel anything yet?" Vale had asked. "Nope, and I'm not sure if it would help if I did." "Why not?" "It's not like I could give you coordinates. The sensitivity doesn't work that way. Best case scenario, all I know is he's in the same room as us." Vale had stopped me, his fingers so warm on my shoulder I could have suggested a trip to the emergency room if he'd been human. "I believe this gift is just a tip of the iceberg, Yasmina. If we nurture it, develop it, I think you will be amazed to discover what lies deep beneath the water." Ironically, that was where we found Gerardo, hiding under the lily pads in the fountain in the building's courtyard. I'd seen vamps fight before, fought beside them, in fact, but Vale surpassed them all. He attacked Gerardo with the ferocity of a starving crocodile, his lips drawn so far back from his teeth that I could see his rear molars without squinting. They both fell back into the mountain, slamming the statue of Emma Hartman Noyes that stood in the middle hard enough to make her wobble. When they emerged, blood bubbled from the huge gash in Gerardo's shoulder. He broke free of Vale's grip and tried to jump out of the water. Vale caught him halfway and he fell hard on the concrete rim. Like a lion on a zebra, Vale latched onto the back of Gerardo's neck, the look in his eyes just as fierce and nearly as primal. Suddenly I knew why the Romans had packed their Colosseum on a regular basis. I wanted to roar with approval. My gladiator was kicking ass, baby. I can't even muster. A sound to my right distracted me. A ponytailed co-ed shuffled out of the shadows. I ran toward her. Get back to your room. You don't want to see this. She jumped me almost before I realized she smelled undead. But the newbies are sloppy. Lack of training, maybe, or an overabundance of hunger. My crossbow bolt pierced her heart before she could even form a decent snarl. When I looked back at the fountains, Vale stood alone as well. We'd smoked both of our vamps without sustaining any major personal damage. Always a cause for celebration. Vale had pointed to the little bits of ash and dust that had fallen where the girl had stood moments before. This is why you must hone your skills. Damn straight. I'll have you know I'm a hell of a vamp killer, I replied hotly. His nod barely stirred air. We locked eyes, and I didn't bother to hide how much his comment annoyed me. I never questioned your lethality, he said. However, that weapon in your hand will do you no good if you die before you get the chance to use it. 6 months later, while I'd accepted his logic, I hadn't made much progress. I often felt like yanking my hair out by the roots, but Vale maintained his cool. He just kept saying, easy is for fools and the truly dead, Yasmina. Remember that. I looked around the lot, wishing I could ping some sort of radar off him. After all this time, I still hadn't figured out how to narrow my search. I'd learned only that if I paid attention to the awareness, it might alert me to when he moved. Leaving the car running, I turned off the headlights and turned on the night vision. It was easier than it sounded. One of my roommates in college was a techno wizard named Miles Bergman, the tall, skinny son of a Russian dissident and an environmental biologist. His paranoia prevents him from working for the government outright, but he does sell us the rights, sometimes exclusive, to use his gadgets. Pete loves the arrangement because it means he doesn't have to put out any extra cash for pesky items like health insurance and vacation days. One of the many cool inventions Bergman developed for me was a set of night vision contact lenses. That is actually really cool. I want some. I squeezed my eyes shut for a couple of seconds, and when I opened them, the interior of the Lexus looked like it had been parked under a green street lamp. The cars surrounding me would have come straight from Enterprise of Emerald City. All lovely shades of lime, they lined up like contestants at the Miss Oz beauty pageant. Only one wasn't what she seemed. One hid a dark, long-lived secret. But which? Dun dun dun. I scanned the lot quickly, never letting my eyes rest in one place for far too long. I'd nearly missed him. He'd stood between a Toyota Tundra and a Jeep Cherokee, an ink blot in the shadows, tapping his cane on the side of his shoe. I see you, I whispered. As if I'd shouted it, he stepped forward. I unlocked the doors as he made his way to the car, just another well-to-do gentleman going out on the town. He looked like an Oscar winner, handsome and elegant in his black tuxedo. Even his cane worked, an integral part of the affluent man's evening clothes, rather than an assassin's tool. He slid into the car beside me, which shook me more than I let on. I preferred him sitting in the back like a boss, rather than in the front like a D. I moved to change gears and nearly yelped when his hand brushed against mine. Wait a moment, Bill said, looking at me steadily through his predatory eyes. I tried not to fidget while he took stock of my hair, dress, shoes, though every passing second squeezed at my nerves as if he'd wrapped them in barbed wire and turned a crank that pulled it tighter until they screamed. I wanted to thump him. Didn't he know he was being rude and unsettling and rude? I opened my mouth to tell him exactly what I thought when he said, "You look incredible, like a goddess." I take back everything I said earlier. Did he call her ugly earlier? The attention-starved teen in me melted. Even my brain reverted. All I could think for a second was, he likes me. He really likes me. Oh my God, you're pathetic. Okay, so he never complimented me before. Still, gag. Oh, okay. Gag for the readers? I squeezed my eyes shut, took my vision back to normal. It helped restore my equilibrium, too. Thanks, I said. You look pretty sharp yourself. I paused a second. I was just thinking about our first mission. You were? It reminded me of a question I've been wanting to ask for a while. One I'd apparently only felt brave enough to pose while in goddess mode. Oh? His tone buttoned up like a Victorian collar. His tone buttoned up like a Victorian collar. I will give someone $10 if they can send me a video clip of them with their tone buttoning up like a Victorian collar. But being temporarily divine, I barreled on. I noticed you always bleed your vamp targets before you take them out. That is true. Well, for cripe's sake, don't go all frosty on me. I didn't give a crap about that part. I just saw a pattern and wondered. Vale sighed, and the whole car filled with a sound, like a mournful wind bouncing off the walls of an empty canyon. It is my failsafe. I do not want to kill innocents, so I take their blood during battle. I can taste whether or not the donor gave it willingly or with his last gasp. Wow, I didn't know you could do that. Cool. Wait, I'm really confused. What does it have to do with innocence? I glanced at him. Not much change, but the easing of the lines around his eyes and lips told me I'd said the right thing, which was when I realized it mattered to Vale what I thought of him. Wow, when had that happened? Probably during your last blackout, spat a bitter, scarred corner of my mind. I regarded it as if it stood separate from me, a flat-chested freshman wearing too much eyeshadow and the confidence of a lame duck president. Shut the fuck up, I told it. Then I drove my boss to the job. Is this like Anastasia Steele's goddess? Are we gonna see more of this flat-chested freshman? Is this gonna be a trend? Is We arrived at the gates of Hassan's mansion behind a short line of vehicles that included 2 limos and a gleaming black Jaguar. One by one, the drivers showed the guards their invitations and were allowed to enter. I hadn't seen any guards on my scouting trip, though intel had informed us Hassan kept anywhere from 10 to 12 on staff. These 2 shopped in the big and beefy section, and still their suit coats barely buttoned, maybe on purpose so all the guests could see the outline of the guns riding underneath. One looked to have some Chinese ancestry. He wore his black hair pulled back into a ponytail. His partner reminded me of Schwarzenegger in his bulkier days. If he spoke with an Austrian accent, I'd struggle not to laugh in his face. Unprofessional, I know, but the more stressed I get, the more likely I am to bow to inappropriate hilarity. I could already feel the giggles tickling the back of my throat. This had better be a damn good forgery, I said, as I took the invitation from the seat beside me and rolled down the window. What? Bill whispered. Are you finally nervous? Is the Pope Catholic? Shh, it's our turn. I pulled up to the gate and handed the invite to Arnold Jr. Up close, he overwhelmed the eyeballs, bit like a tractor with the confidence that came from knowing he could mow us flat without breaking a sweat. Welcome to Alpine Meadows, he said in an American accent. Whew! Dale sat forward. Thank you, he said, his voice more melodic than usual as his eyes met those of the guards. I felt the magic cross my skin on its way to Arnold Jr., a scented breeze of power so purely Vale I would have recognized it in a perfume factory. In 5 minutes you will not remember our faces or the fact that you admitted us. Junior's jaw went slack and his pupils dilated like he'd scored an instant high. He nodded, handed the invitation back to me, and stepped away from the car. Can you do that for me the next time Pete wants to wring my neck? I asked as I moved the Lexus towards Hassan's mini castle. The rumble in Vale's throat could have been anything from a growl to a burp. I stole a look at his face, and from the way his lips were quivering, decided it was a chuckle. The valet had a hard time understanding why any high society dame would want to park her own car. Vale spoke to him and made it all better. He directed us around the house. He directed us around the side of the house where I backed into the space closest to the front door. I sort of specialized in quick getaways. Too bad I wasn't driving a Hummer. It would have been fun to pull straight in and then mow over the perfectly trimmed hedges and gigantic urns on the way out. Like a good little bluebud, I waited for Vale to stroll around and open my door. We took a path lined with Japanese lanterns around to the front of the house. Mansion. Pretentious freaking monstrosity posing as a home. Yeah, that's more like it. At the top of the white marble steps that led to doors the size of rocket silos, a barrel-chested, pock-marked man with the eye of a scorpion took our invitation and added it to a lace-lined basket at his feet. The eyes of a scorpion. Were they beady little eyes? I had a sudden urge of him skipping through the woods holding that basket in front of him like Little Red Riding Hood, and laughed out loud. He and Vale both looked at me strangely. I tucked my left hand into the crook of Vale's arms and patted him with my right. Oh, honey, I finally got the joke you told me on the way here. Hilarious! That's not me. That was her. Vale nodded as if he understood and let me indoors. You will explain that to me later, I hope, he whispered out the side of his mouth. I'll explain it to you now. Then I forgot what I was going to say as we entered a massive marble-lined hall lit with count 'em, 5 sparkling chandeliers. I would love to count them. So many candelabras lined the walls that even if the lights winked out, you would still could have seen well enough to read the fine print on any iffy contract. And the art! I smiled up at Vale as if I belonged among people who thought nothing of owning paintings bigger than my apartment. I had never felt so sorely out of place. Even my teeth felt fake. You are looking gorgeous tonight, my dear, Vale said. Somewhat reassured, I said, Thank you, darling. And may I say you have grown more handsome with each passing day? He nodded graciously, every bit the self-assured multimillionaire we wanted our host to think he was. Speaking of the devil, here he came, greeting his guests with the slick friendliness of a tiger shark at a daily feeding. His white tuxedo set off his dark hair and skin to perfection, and the gold rings on 6 out of 10 of his fingers highlighted his remarkably slender, blunt-nailed hands. I managed not to flinch as he came at me, all teeth and glittering black eyes. Sometimes things would be so much simpler if you could just pull out your gun and shoot the bad guy. Reason number 17 why Indiana Jones is my hero. My dear lady, the little snake was saying as he took my hand from the top of Vale's arm and kissed it. Yuck. I'm so pleased to make your acquaintance. I smiled brightly as his mouth continued to move, but I no longer heard the words. Oh God, not now. But God had taken a coffee break and my senses had gone along for the donuts. Another sound had replaced Hassan's prattle in my shivering brain. A loud buzzing, like an oven timer on steroids, gave warning. Next my vision would narrow to a speck and then poof, disappear. I might come back to myself in 5 minutes, or it might take a couple of days. Afterwards, if I asked the right questions, I might find out what I'd said and done in the meantime. This can't be happening. But it was, and I felt like I was dying, drowning in the flooded hull of my sinking sanity. I looked at Vale, hoping he'd throw me a life preserver as I tried not to blow it, not to panic. He met my eyes briefly, just as part of a second, when without a single word he was somehow able to communicate that he knew something had thrown me off, and that I'd find a way to rise above it. I couldn't betray that trust. I wouldn't. I took a deep breath and the darkness retreated. Lucille Robinson, Vale drawled, introducing alias me to Hassan, and I'm her. He paused, allowing our host to jump to any nasty conclusion he wished. Associate Jeremy Bain. We are, of course, staunch supporters of the New Start and delighted to finally meet its famous founder. Sorry, guys. Hassan shook Vale's hand. So good of you to come, he said. He reached back and pulled a Jessica Simpson clone to his side. What is up with him? Her, I should say, and blondes. I'd been so distracted I hadn't noticed her join us. She stood at least 3 inches taller than me, which gave her a good half-foot on her husband. This is my wife, he said, Amanda. I held out my hand with some difficulty. My little brownout had taken the oomph from my muscles and deposited the whole seething mass in my stomach. If she shook too hard, I'd puke all over her bare wang. But Amanda wasn't up to heavy lifting either. She squeezed my hand as if it were made of porcelain. She did the same for Vale, and then dropped her arm like concrete encased as she murmured. Pleased to meet you. I'm sure there's a better, more unwieldy way to write that. One thing about feeling miserable, you instantly recognize it in others. Amanda Ibn Hassan, I knew, was giving almost everything she had into the task of just staying upright. I looked at Vale quickly to see if he'd noticed the puffiness under her eyes. The look he gave me said he had. Now, why would the wife of a brilliantly successful surgeon have been crying recently? I don't know. Maybe they got into a fight. Don't judge. Several reasons came to mind, but none that totally satisfied my gut feeling about her. It was a mystery worth solving later. Hassan excused himself and Amanda, leaving Vale and I to stand around trying to look natural. Vale snagged a couple of champagne flutes off a passing waiter's tray, and we toasted each other. My face started to hurt from all that smiling. Vale bent down to lay a pretend kiss just below my ear. Even though it didn't land, I still felt it clear to my toes. Okay, Jazz, don't hyperventilate now. We're just faking out the party guest, that's all. The fact that your knees feel a little weak is probably just an estrogen spike. Yeah, that's it. He whispered, let us begin. Let me see how long this is. Okay, this is a pretty long chapter, so I think this is where we're going to end this. I will pick it back up tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, see you tomorrow.